Welcome you back inside the crowded booth. My name is Bryce Koon, and we're talking a little LSU football today and all things SEC with a guy that I'd say, Blake, we've got a lot of sweat equity together over the past week and a half. Blake Ruffino of AYS Sports covers LSU, covers college football, does a great job. Blake, we appreciate you coming on the show, man, and I'm just glad that we didn't have to sweat this morning to be able to talk about LSU football.
So I've been going around like I do these, the Bill King show, or I go on this other radio show, and I this inspired me when you said we've been out there sweating together. You don't live that far. You grew up not that far from the Chattahoochee River. Is that correct?
Very
Okay.
true.
I've been going on every radio show when they ask me how's fall camp going for LSU, saying I feel like Alan Jackson because now I know what hotter than a hoochie coochie is. It's hot out there, man. It's really hot. But it's good to get a good sweat in. It's been nice. I appreciate Brian Kelly for not letting us go out there today because I don't know how much more of this I could have taken.
Yeah, that would have been what, 4 straight days we'd have been out there.
Yeah, that's
we get
what
a
I
little
said last
break.
night.
Yeah.
4 or 5 straight for the last 5 days. I'm like, well, if they're doing it, I guess I can suck it up and do it too. But it's been good, man. I'm appreciative, Bryce, because me and you've been out there every day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very appreciative that like he's allowing us out there like that.
Yeah.
You can't. You want to talk about paranoia and coaches. This is the least amount of paranoia you can get from a coach is letting us out there as long as Brian Kelly and company have let us out there this camp.
Yeah, I've talked with some of my friends on other beats, and they've kind of been kind of like what you said, kind of surprised. Guys over in Athens, with Georgia. You look at Auburn, Alabama. I mean, this is different. And yeah, it's hot, but you can get some good information. You can get some good tidbits and notes out there as well. But
and
Blake,
you get to see it with your eyes too, Bryce. You get to
yes.
see that you're not relying on sources. You get to formulate your own opinion about what you think.
Yeah, and Blake, something that seems torn between the LSU media base here is, and we'll kind of jump into it right here, the defense. I mean, okay,
Yep.
let's start out here. You and I have been in this camp, and I'll preface it with this and throw it to you. 7-on-7s, 1-on-1s, probably geared more towards the offense and the success that those guys can have. And credit to them. 11-on-11, and you and I both sat on the goal line. Now, we were 100-plus yards away, but we sat on the goal line when this reported touchdown came through. But this defense, man, I don't know how good they're going to be when the season starts, but you have to admire the competition that they're putting and just kind of the effort that this group seems to kind of put out there each and every single day.
Bryce, here's how I formulate it, like you said perfectly in the open here. There's difference of opinions, and that's good that there's difference of opinions on the beat. I don't mind the difference of opinion. Here's been my thought process, and I know we were talking about this on the sidelines the other day. I forget who all was with us, but you're going to have to explain to me then what you're seeing on 11-on-11, because for me, I don't look. 7-on-7, if a dude's breaking up a pass, I could, good. That's a bigger win than you not having a pass rush. Where are the linebackers at? And Bryce, a thing that gets missed too, his passing windows, meaning Nussmeier or Collins or Swan, are wide open. So you go into 11-on-11, and then you have Harold Perkins batting a pass up, and Paris Shand picks it off at the D line. Or you have certain situations that you've had over the last 4 days that I'm like, yeah, you dominated in some areas in 7-on-7, 1-on-1s, whatever. But you're now going to have to explain to me, what you've seen in 11-on-11. Now, I've heard it said that, well, Blake, it's probably just bad offense. No, it ain't. No, it's not, because it is Harold Perkins making plays. Bryce, Harold posted it on his Instagram, 3rd and 5, and he shoots through the A-gap and has a tackle for loss on Caleb Jackson. There's 2 things there. I've never seen Harold Perkins from the inside shoot inside the A-gap and make a play. That's number one. Number two, it literally takes an entire unit to bring down Caleb Jackson, but he's doing it single-handedly by himself. I say all that to say this. In my humble opinion, I think the last 4 days have been won by the defense, because I don't really put so much stock on the 7-on-7 or 1-on-1 periods as much as I do the 11 on 11. But what do I mean by win? Bryce, we were out there last year. Jaden Daniels was I can't say what just came to my mind, but we saw last year what other offenses did to this defense. Imagine what the number one offense in the country, what we saw last year in practice, was doing. And there were still difference of opinions on that. I mean, I remember vividly like coming out on our show and saying, plus 4,000, Jaden Daniels, Heisman, here we go, I'm putting it in. It's just so much different. And then you brought up the goal line situation yesterday. I would have paid – Brian Kelly would have donated $1 million if you could make that play against Florida State last year. If you could have made that play versus Alabama last year. So they're winning in the sense of the progression and development has been that much bigger because, Bryce, if they're a top 50 defense, top 60 defense – they're going to be tough to stop. And that's the part of what I'm talking. When you're jumping from 115 in total defense in the country to possibly in the mid-50s, it's more of a win than what the offense we know that they can do. So that's maybe just how I see it. I'm interested to see how or what you think.
Yeah, I think I'll say this. Coming into fall camp, I was a little pessimistic
I agree,
just about the defense. And I think that's, the diehard fans may not love it, but I think that when you take an objective view of this, you say, hey, personnel's largely the same. I mean, you've got a couple pieces. What's their ceiling? I don't know. And then you take a look at the coaching staff, a lot of it, and you kind of hinted at it, internal development. Could guys make the necessary steps to be able to say, hey, we went from playing 10, 15 snaps to we're going to count on you. Oh, and you've got to be a difference maker. And across the board, we'll see. But it is interesting to me, Blake, because we have seen this group, and Harold Perkins used this term in the player interviews a couple days ago. He said, Blake Baker's giving us a chance to be nasty. And he also said, guys' eyes are starting to light up when you see how Baker diagnoses a player, comes up with a different look. To me, Blake, and I don't want to beat down the previous staff. It sounds like these guys are playing inspired by the coaching staff, which you've been inside locker rooms. That matters. This is not a video game. You believing in what your coach is putting out there and drawing up on the board matters 110%.
Well, and I think, like Blake Baker catching a pick on the sidelines and running, and then everybody, like who was it when it was Paris Shand that caught the pick? The entire defense runs out there like they're the University of Georgia and the largest cocktail party against Florida. Like that breeds success on defense. And that's my point that I'm trying to make, Bryce. Like, for example, like LSU posted, from the scrimmage of last Saturday, you got Garrett Nussmeier jumping up in the pocket. He throws the pick to Major Burns. So you have two drives by the offense that get stopped on a fourth down on a pickoff play by Paris Shand, and then Major Burns picks it off. So, again, I ask, like, what am I supposed to formulate? Bryce, I'm going to say that. I'll say it. I have no idea what to make of this team. Okay, like I have no idea what to make of. All right, you're doing great in 7-on-7. However, is this defense going to be this good? I mean, because I don't think Garrett Nussmeier stinks. I don't think this offensive line stinks. I don't think that they're going to be able to not throw the football consistently. Yeah. It's just been when they've needed to make stops, like yesterday at the goal line. I'm like, bro, if you get that, I don't worry about you as much against Ole Miss. I don't worry about you as much against Alabama in the red zone. I don't worry about week one potentially against USC that can throw a lot of different things. But, Bryce, you mentioned something that I think is so key. It's not only that they're playing more inspired, it's that Blake Baker did the number one thing that LSU fans asked of Matt House last year. We're going to put 5 guys at the line of scrimmage on a third down. Our best athletes are going to be out there. Can you stop what we're going to throw at you? And Bryce, to the point, Savion Jones has had a better camp than we've ever seen him have. Is that because of Kevin Peoples' innovation and want to? And that, to me, I think has been the biggest surprise. Now, this has sparked a conversation on our show. I'm sure that you've talked about it as well. Some of this is bad decision-making by Nuss, right? Yes, like some of this is bad decision-making on the throw that he has to Major Burns, bad throws that he's making on 4th and 3rd down. That has sparked this. But since he's done that, Bryce, what have we seen? A goal line. Oh, hey, man, we might be able to make a stop. And then fourth down, you got Jacoby and Guillory, about to go full Mike Tyson on Emory Jones yesterday. But I just look at it and say, man, if you're going to give me that type of effort, all right, now I know that you're for real. Now I know that you can be, I don't want to say a contender, but at least I know that you're not acting like a pretender.
When I go back to last year, I remember Blake post-game Alabama, and at that point, you knew LSU's postseason hopes in terms of playoff were gone.
Right,
especially 3 losses, you can't make it. And shout out to Michael Bonnet continuing to send Greg Penn out there to talk with us. Greg Penn, great interview, great young man, but he's the guy that you send out when you lose because you know that he's not going to put his foot in his mouth. And Blake, what struck me was him talking about the week of Alabama, the week of Florida. A lot of people don't remember defensively against Florida. LSU wasn't great. We just remember Jaden Daniels and what he did.
Right.
Even A&M to a certain extent. Communication. We can't relay. We can't get lined up. Blake, if they can just do that, I mean, you got to feel like this is going to be a better defense. And it seems like, and I asked, Harold Perkins, that the communication's better in terms of relaying from the sideline between Penn and Perkins, whoever it is. Ashton Stamp spoke on it about making sure the secondary is in the right spot. That was such a problem last year. To be a better defense in 2024, I don't think anybody's sitting here saying, hey, you got to be top 25, you got to be top 20. If you can just communicate, get lined up, and let your athletes play like you alluded to, this can be a top 50, top 60 group.
Hey, how can we not get lost in man-to-man coverage?
Yep.
I mean, like, Bryce, we're talking about peewee football, basic assignment, alignment type of issues that they were having last year. So you're right. And Brian Kelly brought this up yesterday. I don't remember who asked or what the sense of the question was, but he was asked about safety play. Brian Kelly comes out there and says, hey, man, I'm going to be real with you. A big concern that I had was I didn't think we're going to be able to communicate the safety position. Boy, was I wrong. Yeah. And like to the old LSU fans, there's a guy on radio and pregame who wore number 18 here, Brandon Taylor, a guy that I grew up with. He was a big-time integral part of that 2011 defense. And I asked Brandon last year, after right before the Missouri game, I'm like, what are you seeing defensively that you think that can get changed overnight? The first thing that he said, Blake, they're not communicating. They're getting lost in man-to-man coverage. Like, you can't – that's basic day one install stuff.
Yeah.
And, Bryce, that has been – have you seen them getting lost at all of camp? Because they really haven't been.
No, they don't look, and I'm going to use this word, and this is not a knock on players. They don't look incompetent. At times last year, it looked like an incompetent defense because they didn't know what was going on. They couldn't communicate. And by the time they were getting set, I mean, Blake, I remember going back and looking at games, watching them before we do our show over at Go 24/7, and the amount of times you see somebody checking, somebody saying something as the ball's being snapped. I mean, that can happen a couple of times and you get away with it, but when it's every 2-3 plays, I mean, it's no secret why they were as bad as they were.
Well, and last year, and this isn't a knock, you talking about players, like it's not a knock on Major Burns. Major Burns is not the line you up guy. He's the guy that's at the line of scrimmage that's talking to the offensive tackle like, hey, Jelly Roll, let's, what you going to do now? You got to, not only, Bryce, do you have to know like schematical stuff, but you got to know your personnel. Major Burns is playing a lot better in that star position or what we used to call like rover. I mean, look, man, there are times as a former offensive lineman when he's at the line of scrimmage, I know that it's giving Emory Jones and that unit confusion because if he's looking like he's got a blitz, Bryce, I mean, you have to account as a center, a young DJ Chester. Hey, I got to account for this man. I dog it. Here's Harold Perkins. So you know what? Major Burns, sorry, I love you, but arguably one of the best linebackers in the country is on the other edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the lucky call. I'm going to shift left. And then they back out. Harold Perkins goes into coverage, and then here comes Major Burns. Everything that was not here last year is the polar opposite. And I think that has shell-shocked, I think, me. And I think that
Agreed, same.
That's the part where I keep saying that they're winning, because they're just coming from all over the place. And another thing, guys not getting their feelings hurt in reference to the rotational piece of stuff. Greg Penn comes out, Whit Weeks comes in. Like, that has been a massive deal. And like, I'll give an example on this too. Like, everybody looks at Caleb Jackson's catch in the flat and the run over of Whit Weeks. Bryce, that forced a fourth down. Like, yeah. I don't care that he got run over. It forced a fourth down, then an interception the next play. I don't care if he gets run over and his body is implanted into the ground and he shoots all the way through the earth and he comes out and Kim Jong-un's on the other side. Like, I don't worry about that. I worry, did you make the stop? And, man, the level of them wanting to, it's going to make them so much different. But I think that Brian Kelly said it best yesterday. It's been the thing that we've talked about the last 4 shows that we've had, and he brought it up yesterday. I don't know what to make of a team that's this balanced in 11-on-11 period. I don't know. Yeah. Let me. I know that I'm on your show here, but let me ask, what do you think about the balance? That's the thing that's confusing me the most. It's like, well, is this defense good, or is this offense, is Sloan like doing this or that? Like, what do you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I expected, and I think it'd be hard to find a media member that predicted this coming into fall camp. You had to be lying to yourself.
Right.
But I think we've all been shell-shocked a little bit by the balance, because I think I expected a little bit of what we saw last season, like all this talk about, in the early videos when we weren't at practice and summer workouts of, Kyron Lacey making some great grabs, CJ Daniels being a threat over the middle with his size, Chris Hilton taking a drag or a slant, 40 yards down the field.
Right.
And I don't want to say those guys haven't played well. I think we've all individually seen them do well. It's just that for as many wins as the offense gets, like if we're sitting here tracking plays, let's say offense wins 5, defense is winning 4 or 5 as well. Like,
right.
It's just not something. I think when you look at this balanced attack, and I'll kind of throw it back to you, because like you said, it is my show. I'll throw it back to you here. But my biggest question is okay, does this mean that there should be a level of concern for the offense? Because like you said, I still think it's the best offensive line of the SEC, maybe
right.
top 3 in the country. Running back room seems like it can be, if John Emery stays healthy, you feel more comfortable about the depth. Quarterback, I mean, look, LSU's in an envious position with the guy like Nussmeier and the experience he has. I know he hasn't played a lot, but the balance of it would tell you, well, look, we're getting ready to do our live show on next Monday night talking just about our playoff picks. Blake, with what I've seen through 2 weeks and close in person, maybe I'm biased. It's going to be hard for me not to put LSU in that top 12.
Bryce, I put him in.
That's where I'm leaning.
Bryce, I put him in. I put him in on Ruffino and Joe show this week. I put him out of the 11 seed because I didn't want to get too biased.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you're going to have to now start convincing me that defensively they don't make stands versus USC. They don't make stands versus Ole Miss. They don't make stands versus Alabama. You brought up something that's interesting, the offensive piece of this. Again, I think it's a mixture of a lot of things. I think Garrett's made some bad decisions. I also think he's made some really clever decisions. Yeah. And that's what scares me a little bit in reference to, because we come into the offseason and coming into fall camp, coming based off of spring, Bryce, they got absolutely obliterated in that spring game. They got absolutely obliterated in all of spring practice. Now a 180 has happened. So now our natural, human minds are like, well, we haven't seen development on defense like this. So then we're saying, oh, well, is Joe Sloan just not a good play caller, or is Garrett Nussmeier making bad decisions? No. You know what? I'm being like, I want to be conservative on this. No, that's what practice is with great teams or really good teams is actually supposed to look like. But because they were so bad on defense last year, I'm like, oh, I don't know. Maybe they do suck on offense. It's a joke.
And let me add this real quick. Well, I was talking with a couple fans on our board and on some social media about it. It seems like there's a lot of the negative crowd that's like, well, if that's the case, then the offense is going to be terrible. Like, say goodbye. Defense might be average. I think LSU fans are hurt by what happened last year in terms of they cannot
Yes.
get over that. Why can't it just be, like you said, this is what a great team looks like, where you're going toe-to-toe each and every single day? And also, all this talk about Brian Kelly being a great coach, I think he is. This is what it's supposed to look like when you hire an A-plus staff. They develop with the athletes you have.
Well, and not only that, it's what like 2019 looked like, Bryce. Like, let me give an example, okay? When I first got into this business in 2017, it was going into the 2018 season. Burrow comes in. Now, Orgeron only led like 15, 20 minutes of practice in the beginning, which was, it was what it was. But you know what we saw in those individual drills? A guy named Derek Stingley versus Jamar Chase. And what would happen is that 5 reps would be won by Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Well, then you had 2 first-round corners in Christian Fulton and I'm not saying Ashton Stamps is a first-round corner, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Like, it was balanced. And then you had Joe Burrow coming into team interviews or player interviews and saying, hey, man, I'm legitimately throwing it at Derek Stingley to see what we have, yes, but because, he's a freshman, and it's what I would do in a game, and he's intersecting me. Like, Bryce, we went into the practice before they played, or the week before they played UCF. He's trying to throw a fade route to Justin Jefferson, and he's picking it off. Well, then now I'm having flashbacks of the thought of, well, man, that's exactly what Ashton Stamps just did on what might be a first, 60 pick in Kyron Lacey. So I really feel like this is what, when you mention it, it's a great point. When you hire Brian Kelly, this is what it's supposed to look like. Now, can you translate it? Because look, last year I thought Ashton Stamps was the best practice player I'd ever seen, and then he couldn't translate it to the field. Is that what's happening? I think that there's so many question marks, Bryce, that nothing would surprise me going into week 1. The thing that would surprise me, though, is that if your defense doesn't look just vastly better. The thing that becomes, though, too, that I'm asking myself, we haven't seen them in crucial situations run the football like, hey, man, let's line it up in a scrimmage. Now, we'll get this in 2 weeks, I think, or a week and a half. What happens on 1st and 10 from the 25-yard line and you have the ability in Tiger Stadium to run the football? And I think that that's going to be an ultimate litmus test of what we think or the outlook of the season may be.
Well, and we talk so much about this offensive line. Look, if it's 3rd and 4, last year, Denbrock's, probably drawing up his own read, some type of short pass, let Jaden go play. When it's 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3 now, and look, we want to talk about Josh Williams. I like Josh Williams. We want to talk about Caleb Jackson. Nussmeier's going to turn and hand it to him. I think that's when you're going to learn a lot about this offense, because it is going to have elements of it that can run the football and dictate. Just because I think it's going to have to look like that. But just kind of going off of that, we talked offense, we talked defense. One more point I want to make before I maybe get, and you hinted at a little bit of a prediction of some sorts, but interior defensive line has been a massive, massive question.
No doubt.
You and I have both seen, still is, as we've probably only established on this podcast, LSU has questions and nobody knows what to make of them. I have maintained Jacobian Guillory is going to be 1 starter. Gio Paez, to me, is a high floor player. I loved the interview we had him with the other day, loved what he talked about, loved what he's about. I don't know how high his ceiling is. Outside of that, Blake, look, we've seen Sean Washington. He's looked violent at times. JVR Suggs has come on as of late and maybe having some good reps, but we didn't see a lot of him in the beginning of fall camp.
Right.
Dominic McKinley looks the part. I've said he's got to become more polished, but outside of that, we've seen Shand. We've seen Savion Jones kind of slide inside in some type of formations. How creative is Blake Baker going to have to get, in your opinion, for this to be able to work?
Bryce, let's think about this. In their 2-minute drill, he ran out 5 defensive ends, edge rushers.
Yeah.
Okay, like that's what he did. And the only problem with that is when you do that and you can't substitute and they run the football right at you, you might get burned. But the other problem with that is that you're going to get burned running the football right now to some extent with those other guys in the interior anyway.
Yeah.
I think they've been more creative. Like Bryce, it's a 5-1 look that they go to in this prowler look. I mean, again, you're going to have to consider Harold Perkins as a down lineman if you're a guard, strictly due to the fact that if that dude does rush the passer and you're not ready for it, you're in serious trouble. Look, us guard center, us guys in the interior, we don't get this fat for a reason. Now, we have a plus size because of these love handles we have, so it takes them a longer time to go around. But you got to consider that he's a down lineman. So the things that you've done is very interesting because I do think that you have a lack of talent, or I don't want to say depth, but just a lack of high productive talent in the interior.
Playable depth. That's the word.
Playable
That's the term
depth.
I use.
Yeah, I agree with that. Playable depth. I think Jacobian has been, very serviceable. Bryce, have you seen somebody in 11-on-11 besides him in that interior make a play? Because I haven't. I haven't seen one. What I saw was Caleb Jackson on a zone read counter RPO with Mason going down in the flat, him going untouched and going for 7. And if that happens, you're in serious trouble because, look, Ulysses S. Bennett IV, okay? He sounds like he should be a president or a law firm, right, at Ole Miss. The running game at Alabama, I think, is going to be really good. And by the way, I know that Reuben Owens is out at A&M. Colin Klein wants to run the rock. So you better that's the 3 games that would scare me the most. Oh, and by the way, what does Oklahoma do? I know Jackson or whatever, but I mean, that's just what scares me. And then, by the way, hot take, I don't think Lincoln offensively last year, I don't think that they were bad. I don't think they're a bad team as some people have made them out to be. So I just think that if there's a biggest concern for me at the current moment, it's still that position.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you kind of hinted at it. So let's kind of end it right here.
Yep.
Like, I have maintained that depending on what Jackson Arnold is, and at that point in the season when LSU plays in final game, you're going to know what Jackson Arnold is. That game could be a playoff game for the playoff.
No doubt.
How do you think this?
That Casey Thompson's not in at this point.
Exactly.
I mean, see, here's the thing. Let me formulate it like this. You talk about Jackson Arnold, and that could be a playoff game at the end. What if I would have told you in a scrimmage that a new starting quarterback for the first time threw 2 picks in a scrimmage? You could put that on Garrett Nussmeier, okay, well, what he did, or Jackson Arnold of what's being reported out of Oklahoma. But it very much could be, Bryce. Here's the thing that I lean on and why I put LSU on Ruffino and Joe show at 11 in the playoff. Name a better staff top to bottom than them. Like, name a better staff. Now, I think Ole Miss's staff is really freaking good. I don't know about USC. I don't think Oklahoma's got a better staff.
Nope.
And I got to be real with you. I don't know about Bama either. And I think Brian Kelly, as much as he gets ridiculed and poo-pooed upon, dude, this staff is going to be something serious. And that is why I gave him an edge in that Oklahoma game. I had him either going 9-3 or 10-2. The thing with me is I just got them beating Oklahoma, and that's why I put them in. I think that Kyle Field scares the bejesus out of me because, them male cheerleaders get to going and stuff gets weird. And then Ole Miss, because I think that they're one of the most talented teams in the country. And what do you do in both of those games, Bryce? So I got them a borderline playoff team, but in a completely different way than last year, like you would have been, just based off of that, you will have more balance.
Yeah, more balance is kind of the entire theme of this show,
right.
and really a fall camp. Blake, obviously, and wanted to get to this last question right here.
Yep.
This has been asked and posed to players, to coaches, and they've kind of answered it. I think we're going to see a lot more of this once we hit game week. But for you, how important is week 1? It has been much talked about that LSU cannot get over the hump. And I will tell you, playoff hopes aside, I don't think you can lose this week 1 and feel comfortable about a playoff spot, even if you go 9-3, 10-2 at the end of the season. I don't know. How do you feel about this game against USC? I know it's a way too early look, but just the importance of it and how to set the tone the right way.
You know, the last game that I ever went to in person as a media member was 2019 LSU versus Georgia Southern, and they won. So if anybody is watching this and you have a crap load of money and you want to send me to Vegas, you go right on ahead. We'll do the post game for there. But Bryce, I think that you got to get over that hump. I have labeled it and got ridiculed on it. I don't care. I think it's the most important game of the season. Right? Like I really do. And I know that it's week 1 and you got so many other things that you have to do. But if you can't win there, then momentum starts going down, confidence starts going down. Everything that you've built up the last 3 weeks that we've been out there could be shot. Now, I'm going to tell you something, Bryce. I don't care what anybody tells me. I watched the last 4 games of USC. We did a film breakdown of them the other night. They are really good on offense. They are really good on special teams. They blocked 4 punts in the last 3 games. By the way, the receiver that blocked the punt on the very next play caught a Caleb Williams touchdown. They have a block punt versus Louisville in a bowl game. By the way, the very next play, bang, Miller Moss over the top for a touchdown. I think that this is the most important game in Brian Kelly's LSU tenure at the current moment. Look, this place, you've seen Ed Orgeron, Les Miles, Nick Saban, all three coaches that have won national titles here in the last 2 decades. Year 2 that they had slip-ups they had no business having. Issues that they've had. It's been year 3. What can you do? How can you progress? I think that when you go into Vegas and you go into USC and it's a standalone game, it's so important. You got to win week 1 because if you do, Bryce, I think you're going to go in that Ole Miss game 5-0, undefeated, October 12th, which is going to be the most beautiful day in college football from just an overall landscape of things. You could be College Game Day. You could be the game that everybody is featuring, even though Oregon and Ohio State are playing. So to me, you got to win week 1. You got to go all balls to the wall. You got to do it. And Bryce, can they is going to be the ultimate question because here's the thing. You know what scares me the most about USC? They have so much that they want to prove too, and so does Lincoln. And when you get a pit bull back up in the corner, it scares me. I ain't going up to no pit bull in the corner. It's just not going to happen. So long-winded answer, I think it's the most crucial game on your schedule.
Yeah, week 1's going to be exciting, and I keep telling people almost kind of what you said, but in a different vein. You have 2 teams with a lot to prove. 2 programs with a lot
no doubt.
And 2 head coaches that with a lot to prove at big brain name programs. So going to be very interesting to watch that week 1 as well. Well, Blake, we appreciate the time, man, as always.
No problem.
We're going to see each other out there, obviously, on Saturday. But before we get out of here, I want our viewers, our listeners, to know where they can find what you do with AYS, and then obviously that great show, Ruffino and Joe, which is, man, that's a good watch. It's a fun time.
Thank you. 2 Italians yelling at one another. You would have thought that, it would have picked up, somebody else would have tried 2 Italians doing that before. Anyway, Ruffino and Joe show Sunday, Monday, and Wednesdays. We just talk all of college football, basically what you guys do. Same thing. Yeah. And then AYS, I mean, now, Bryce, the season started pretty much every day that we're out there. So probably 5, 6, 7 days a week, anywhere you listen to podcasts. I want to give a shout out to all the people in the 318, hey, man, that audio podcast is picking up. I appreciate all of y'all, but go rate, review, and subscribe there too. So AYS Sports, wherever you're on social media.
Blake Ruffino, AYS Sports, Ruffino and Joe show. He's a good friend, and man, it's been fun talking with you. We're going to have to get you on throughout the season as well, especially.
No doubt, man.
And I don't know how you feel about this, especially when we get into our best bets show, which is
love it.
It's going to be interesting. I lost brutally last year towards the end of the year. So
I had a very bad collapse on Joe DeLeon last year. Your boy was in the lead, and I got cocky, and I fell down the stretch. But I still owe him a bottle of bourbon because of it. But those first 8 weeks, Bryce, I was on fire. Daddy was on fire here, so I would look forward to it.
Blake Ruffino, we appreciate the time talking all things LSU and a lot of big questions, and we'll catch you next time here on the Crowded Booth Podcast.